You all set? Yeah. At this time, we'd like to begin the public hearing portion of our meeting, somewhat delayed. First item on tonight's agenda for the public hearing is a special permit application for the conversion of a single-family dwelling to accommodate an elderly apartment. This is submitted by William M. and Mary K. Thompson for property known as 555 Dogwood Road.
That's being continued to the first meeting in September.
That item is being continued to our first meeting in September. The next items on the agenda are the applications referring to the special uses and the proposal by Sunrise Hill Estates for property known as, on the assessor's map, Sunrise Hill Estates. The applicant would like to come forward, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Denise, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. Again, my name is Joe Porto. I represent the applicant, Anderson Wilcox Corporation, regarding the project now known as Fieldstone Village. Mr. Chairman, you may recall when we were here last, there were a couple of points of concern that were raised by you and some of the other members that we would like to address. With me this evening, of course, is Mr. Gordon. We have our architect, Mr. Bergen, back, and we also have brought an expert to testify as to the reasons why 55 and older is, in our opinion, preferential. That's Stan Yadowski of Realty Concepts. Mr. Gordon does have time constraints, so with your permission, I'd like to get him on first. Then I'm going to come back and address some of the issues that he's not going to touch on, and then we'll get into the rest of our presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, staff, thank you. Again, my name is Jeff Gordon. I'm principal of Codispodian Associates. I am a landscape architect, land use planner, licensed here in Connecticut and New York. And I would like to address some of the items as Mr. Porto basically alluded to. In our last meeting, there were some excellent points raised by the commissioners and staff. And I just want to let you know that we've reviewed these in depth. And I just want to give you a little bit of the genesis of how this concept that we see before you developed into the plans that we have applied for. A number of years ago, I started working on age-restricted housing. Part of a design competition here in Orange was one project. Did quite a bit of it up in Vernon, and was involved in a very large project, which was part of even larger projects up in Oxford. And it's at that time I actually had some conversations with the town planner, Mr. Miller, about the way that a lot of these age-restricted developments were really progressing. Sometimes you had mid-rise and high-rise buildings, but very often you had buildings that really were a lot of single-family homes, and as you drove down the street, all you had were just a sea of garages. And that happens to be something that was really prevalent in the industry and in housing in general. And in some of the research that I've done, there's been people lamenting that garages are now taking up, in many cases, 50% of a building facade, a house facade, as garages get bigger and bigger and the car becomes king. Well, in some of the additional research, we looked at what can we do. Some considerations is to get away from garage door architecture. The front door, rather than the garage, should always be the positive entry impact for the home. The alternatives are to place the garage either rear or side loading to create variety. And what was emphasized in one article, whenever possible, keep the garage door off the street elevation. And we took that to heart, and we looked at the possibility of going back to more traditional design communities which featured rear-oriented alley-loaded garages. And by doing this, the garage and the driveway are eliminated from the front elevation of the home, and this creates a streetscape that is less car-dependent and more pedestrian-friendly. And that really was the basis of what we were trying to accomplish. Even on some of the homes around the perimeter, we did side-loaded garages with a combined entry court to minimize the driveways, to minimize the visibility of garage doors from the street, and to really enhance the walkability of the property. Now, what I have noticed in time is one development that I did, which was a fairly intimate development, is not age restricted. It was in Milford, near the highway behind the Old Navy site there. It's called Forest Glen. And they built little 1,200 square foot houses with walkout basements and one-car garages. But the placement of the homes was wide enough away where people wanted to make use of that space between buildings, and they started creeping in and dropping a little asphalt so they could put cars there. So we wound up, again, having more of the car along the streetscape rather than less of it. And sometimes that's the problem that you have if you have too much space between buildings. As you can look at this development, it was very intricate. It's been put together through a lot of care, and it really has, in many cases, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle where there's a lot of interconnection. The alleyways are very, very important. We put the garages in the back, again, to create that streetscape. And I was looking at one of the comments and one of the questions that was raised by Chairman Clark about what if we were to spread the buildings out a little further. And while that is possible, my fear is that we would lose some of the intimacy that we've tried to create here by having narrower homes closer together with a tremendous variety of building facade treatments. If we moved them farther apart, we would probably be in a situation where we either would spread out and we would lose a lot of the perimeter of the property, or we would be forced to combine buildings together. Basically, maybe every 4 homes would then be 3 homes, so the 3 gaps of 20 feet would be 60 feet, and I could get 30 feet out of that. But then what happens is the massing of the buildings gets bigger, and the proximity to the street, you start to find that that bigger massing is too close to the street, and really the whole concept could start to break down. So the intimacy is what we're trying to create here, of some fine, detailed facade treatments with a lot of ins and outs with the fenestration. And I looked at I went online just to look at rear alley homes, and it was just very interesting what you find, because one of the concepts here was from the Seattle Housing Authority, and I found all over the area, all over the country, that this is really what is the direction that people are going in. We saw that 42% of the people prefer this because it had the best street appeal by far. It had a sense of community, sense of scale, and it fit in with the historic housing area. Also, friendly porch and lots of light upstairs, very simple designs, and these type of things really became very attractive to people who were prospective purchasers. So I'd just like to leave you with that for your record. But that is, again, it's a very important portion of the development, is to have that intimacy. The homes
Tim, you could
are
copy those for the
reasonably close to the streets because they have that smaller massing, and it can handle that. If we get too big, we really become a different project than what we really put forth here. It's a good idea in certain areas, and we see that we have that separation around the perimeters, but as we get into the core of the development, the intimacy is really what's important there. And we would certainly ascribe that we don't want to see 4 or 5 of the same houses in a row there. We would want to see a tremendous variety there, and we would certainly agree to have a variety of facade treatments and never more than 2 in a row or anything of that nature that would be the same. We certainly think that that would be a way to deal with that. Also, there was a comment about putting in a left turn lane here. Now, the road slopes, we really don't want to widen it, but by pulling this median back further, that would allow us the width there to get in a left turn lane, probably stack 2 or 3 cars there, which development of this low traffic generation should certainly be sufficient. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. Nobody likes to wait for somebody in front of them. So if we can speed it up a little bit, those of us who are over 55, we move in there, we don't think we have as much time left, so we were in a hurry. Okay. Now, the other comment that I will address, and the balance will be handled by Attorney Porto, was the temptation for people to use the back entrance there. Now, this back entrance, we spent a lot of time with the fire marshal, discussions with the chief. We also talked with the police chief and the traffic commission. Because of the cul-de-sac length there and eliminating the road through here, this was a design that we came up with working with those two safety-oriented bodies. They had us go a little wider. I think we have 16-foot pavement now is what was requested. So that's what we're doing there. But to make it a comfortable thing for people to constantly drive on, we don't want that any more than the neighbors in this subdivision would want. So what we would recommend would be to have integrated lengths of, I would call them rumble strips or embossed paving. People will go with what's convenient and comfortable. And if you've ever accidentally fallen asleep and drifted off the side of the road and went on a rumble strip, it's not convenient nor is it comfortable. And if we widen them out a bit, we think that that would discourage all but the most committed person who wants to take that drive through there.
So that you're saying that the entire strip should be the rumble strip?
I wouldn't do the entire strip, but I would do maybe a series of 20-foot lengths, you know, off and on, because you don't want to emboss the whole thing there. But if we could do a couple of swaths through there, it would not be the most comfortable place for someone to drive, but it would certainly be fully accessible for all emergency vehicles, which is what it's designed for. The traffic safety and the fire department, they do not want a barrier.
Or a speed bump or anything like
Or
that.
a speed bump especially is not desirable, because if you're in a hurry and you hit one, you can lose control. But those are traffic calming things. They really slow people down. And if you don't have to go that way, you're not going to go
The
that way.
signage wouldn't be precluded, right?
I'm sorry?
Able to sign that this is not to be used
Not a
as
speed
a
drive.
And so on, yeah.
Right, emergency vehicles only, things of that nature. So I think those are the points that I was going to address. I think that Attorney Porto has a good list for you to consider after that. But if you have any questions regarding those points, I'd like to.
Jeff, I have a quick question. I had a brief discussion with Mr. Miller, and we were discussing the spacing and the effects, and he mentioned also that, you know, that it's somewhat the intimacy factor here too. But he also mentioned a project that he was familiar with where they staggered the frontage or the setbacks. Is that possible to do? I don't know how much of a stagger you were referring to.
Yeah,
Well, it was, yeah, there was a stagger.
I'm sorry, there was a stagger, and because of that concern about the monotony, one of the differences, you know, after I spoke with you, Bo, is that project did not all had front garages, so that certainly, you know, we could talk about differences of facades, but if you have a garage up front, I mean, a garage door is kind of a garage door. That was one way that, from a site plan perspective, that we could avoid that. I did talk to Mr. Gordon after that, and we kind of went over that because, in fact, in a previous town, in a previous project, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is one of the concerns I've had with these higher density projects. And sometimes they're addressed and sometimes they're not. And I had mentioned it to Mr. Gordon several years ago. So there are a number of ways which this can be addressed, whether it's a staggering, whether it's a difference in the facade, whether it's kind of eliminating some of the garages from the front. And what I had suggested to Mr. Gordon, you know, as I spoke with you, is that put it back in, that's I think a very important legitimate concern of this commission, and let the applicant describe how they propose to eliminate the potential for that monotony. And I think that's what Mr. Gordon is doing now. That's certainly one way to do that. But there may be some other ways as well.
Which he did describe as having the different treatments in the house and not having a monotony design down the street.
Right.
Is what he
And also, I think that we might maybe a few houses will have a little picket fence, others won't have it. So we're committed to that variety there to try to give that quaint old town feeling. But my problem is that the envelope is very tight. I have the garages have to be 8 feet off the alley, and the building facades, whether it's the terrace line or whatnot, has to be 15 feet back. So, I mean, we can make some of the houses a hair smaller than the others to do that, but I think stepping back the facades, a bay here, a porch here, set back, I think we're going to get a lot of variety in the architecture as Mr. Bergen will show us.
Jeff, who will be making those decisions with regard to the facade, since it's going to be built in phases? Would that be the developer's decision or the homeowner's decision, or?
Well, I think we would make the commitment not to have any more than a certain type of repetitive nature, but I think the market might have a lot to do with it as well. But with one footprint, there's probably a variety of different facades that could take place on those.
I believe the architects said there were, what, 15 different possibilities for one of the footprints?
I believe so. So we could limit that there would be no more, and even if you had two themes next to each other, certainly the color or the siding style could be changed too.
I would suggest that, you know, the applicant just indicated or represented the applicant that he would make that commitment on the facades, and that somehow that could be embodied within the, if this commission decides to approve this project, it certainly could be embodied within that approval, either as a notation on the site plan or as part of the resolution of approval that this commission makes. And that would be a way, and that could certainly be interpreted by the zoning enforcement officer, and if there's a question on his, you know, when he's reviewing it, that would be brought back to this commission.
Yeah, we can make that commitment.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Gordon, because he does have some time constraints this evening? And
They're calling me.
I think Mr. Gordon's addressed my concerns between Mr. Miller and Mr. Gordon. They've been addressed, so we'll let Jeff run to another meeting then.
All right. Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, turning to the other points that I'm going to address, we have submitted, my office submitted on the 17th of August, our proposed final regulation. We sent it to Mr. Denise under cover of a letter dated August 17, 2007, so that we should be able to properly differentiate between that one and the other two that seem to have made its way to the file. In respect to some of the points that you raised, we have changed the following paragraphs. Paragraph A3, entitled Occupancy, we have indicated that no permanent resident under the age of 21 years of age will be permitted. Under paragraph...
Joe, I just want to stop you right there.
Go ahead.
I missed last, although I did see the disc. Is there a change on how the applicant intends to handle children in the children that are born here?
Well, the answer is at this point, we are going to leave that to the, not the agency, the association, thank you. But there's no child allowed on a permanent basis under the age of 21. So our regulation contemplates to allow for a small window of time for an emergency type of situation. But the reality is that if a resident has a child, they're going to have to leave.
So yeah. It contemplates the sale of the home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Porter, were you going to propose specific language to that, or is that going to be left up to the commission to impose that language?
Regarding,
well, there's actually three issues: the issue of a child being born while the parents are residents, the issue of a death or divorce leaving one person under the age of 55. We discussed it. We just touched on it, I believe, in the first public hearing. Was that language that you were going to submit to us for our approval? And of course, the one with the children now. Or is that language that you would like the commission to come forward with?
well, I suspect that we would like to propose that language, Mr. Chairman. I thought that our regulation dealt with if a person should pass away and they leave a spouse that is under the age of 55, that person would be allowed to remain.
That is under a single household member, may also be under the age of 55 if he or she is the surviving spouse of a previously qualifying occupant. So I guess we're down to the divorce and children.
Right, and while it does not say divorce, my opinion would be that we would treat that similarly.
Similarly to the child that
Yes.
you have X amount of time to...
No, actually, similarly to the surviving spouse,
Okay.
quite frankly. See, because the driving force behind all this, of course, is that we want the occupants to be 55 or older.
Right.
So, but what we don't want is anyone that's under the age of 21 on a permanent basis.
Okay.
So the likelihood is that someone that is a qualifying spouse wouldn't likely marry someone under the age of 21 years old. So, we're going to get beyond our floor, while we might not always have every occupant that reaches our ceiling.
Okay.
What about this scenario? The survivor is under the age of 55 and remarries someone also under the age of 55. Could that happen?
Well, they're a qualifying applicant at that point. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what it says here, right? They're under, I'm looking under your
It's
regulation.
under A1.
Right, that if she is a previously qualifying applicant.
Right. My opinion, interpreting our own regulations, would be that would be okay. So long as the new spouse is not under 21.
It's funny, I've gone to these discussions at more towns now than I care to admit. There's always a little snickering going on about the over 55 marrying the under 55, however you want to arrange it. But what I would suggest is that we're not going to cover every scenario, but we could cover as many as we can cover. And I would just suggest that the regulations at least put those scenarios together and allow the town or the association with the approval of the town to make certain exceptions. And I think the other point I had made in my earlier memorandum is that within the regulations that there be a requirement that all this be embodied within a deed restriction that's put on the that's put enclosed with this. I would suspect that's the intent of the applicant anyway. But if the town looks at this as if they do decide to approve this amendment, and that some other developer wishes to use this in some other location, and this commission thinks that's appropriate, then I think it's in this commission's interest to have it as tight as it can be and as few questions left open as possible.
Well, Mr. Miller, what we had contemplated doing, or what we anticipated doing, was putting these restrictions into declaration documents, but not putting them in each deed restriction. Each deed restriction would then refer, of course, to the declaration.
That's just incorporation by reference.
Right.
I think that gets to where Brian needs to go to.
Right. So that's what we were thinking about doing.
I do think, though, that you may want to at least deal with the issues of divorce and the child, not so much, but the so that the A1 surviving, if you intend to have that as taking care of a divorce as well, that you may want to mention that in there.
Understood. I made the note. A good point. Good point.
My only point is, again, with your intention and going along with Commissioner Kaplan, is that be embodied also within the regulation.
Understood. Okay, so that's paragraph A3. Paragraph C, which is captioned street frontage, you would note that we amended the frontage to state 1,475 feet on Grassy Hill Road and 1,775 feet on Route 34, making it more site-specific. Paragraph E1, captioned allowed uses, we have committed to a density of no more than 3.75 dwelling units per net acre.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just if I'm just might interject as we go down that.
Yeah.
One of my original comments is that, again, this is a little nitpicky, and it's not to the core of it, but it's kind of housekeeping. Is definition of single-family detached. That's not in the current zoning regulations, and it may be, since it has not been an issue before, but now that it's going to be used, it may be a good idea just to incorporate a definition.
So you would ask us to create a definition for a single-family home detached?
Right, and put it in the definition part.
Brian, your concerns are the unrelated people living together and figuring out what a single family is, or?
It's not even that. It's just that that there may be different. Again, it's to kind of firm it up a little bit on what we're talking about here. Are we talking about a fee simple dwelling? Are we talking about where there's a a basement and there's nothing above or below? I assume that's what we're talking about. And also, again, it's not a big deal. It's not urgent. It's not. We could do without it, but while we have it on the table, it just, again, to avoid any future misunderstandings.
Okay. Paragraph F3, we've stated that under development limitations, there'll be a maximum of 150 units in the development. Under paragraph J8, or actually I should start with J6, caption building standards. No more, the regulation now states no more than 3 dwelling units shall be contained in any single building. And same paragraph, subparagraph 8, the longest residential building not exceed 60 feet without a change in fenestration, and a maximum length of the building shall be 105 feet. Mr. Chairman, I think you recommended 100, but we're told we need 105.
That's fine. I actually said between 100 and 120 is what I think I've said. But I have a question also. Under J, this is when we discuss the percentage of 1 and 2 bedroom homes.
Yes.
You had stated that your intent was to stick with the 67%. We had a June 11th and a June 12th. One was 67, June 12th was 50.
Right.
I see it's back at 50 here.
That is correct, sir. It is back at 50, and the thinking there is that's the number we need to accommodate the people that we are anticipating being interested in buying these units. Now, what we have done to address your points, and Mr. Bergen will address this in more detail, is we've amended the floor plans so to make it such that the dens and lofts cannot be considered bedrooms pursuant to the state health code. And again, Mr. Bergen will expound on it, but we've widened the doorways in the dens, and we've created half walls or knee walls in our lofts to get outside of that definition of a potential bedroom.
And additionally, in that same paragraph, there's the sentences, dens and open lofts shall not be construed as bedrooms.
That's correct.
I don't think we can have 2 separate standards for bedrooms in our residential zone. I mean, that's a violation of 8-2, the uniformity clause that's in 8-2. You can't have a definition, you can't define a bedroom in one type of a residential development and have it defined differently in another type of residential development within the same zone. I think we should scratch that language.
How do we define it in the other sections of the regulations?
It's defined in the state health code. So we don't we don't have any such recommendation. What would happen is the town sanitarian would look at the plan and say, well, this is a bedroom, that's a bedroom, or whatever. That's how it's defined there, and he would define, just have the septic system designed around those constraints. If there's problems with it, then obviously, you can't add additional bedrooms if your septic system isn't designed for that.
But the sewer here.
But the same thing holds, though. My point is that we can't have a definition that differs from something we accept in the rest of the town.
We should be incorporating, and the applicant should be incorporating whatever definition is into the project and creating that room according, so that it would not be considered a bedroom, whatever they have to do in order to...
Correct, and my suggestion is to just strike that sentence, and again, have it be this, the building inspector and the town sanitarian decide what's a bedroom or not currently, and I think that's the method we should use here as well. I mean, the architect is going to address these issues, how he's taken some of the things that I would consider a bedroom in some of the original floor plans, and how he's addressed them to make them so they would not fit the state definition of a bedroom.
You're saying, just so that I'm with you, the dens, the statement that the dens and open lofts shall not be construed as bedrooms, which should be out.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then we're setting a different standard.
I had a concern about that as well, is I'm not sure that the zoning regulations do anything for bedrooms elsewhere, but again, I think you need to be uniform throughout the regulation.
And again, we don't have it in our zoning regulations because it's in the health code, and the town sanitarian deals with that. For instance, we had an elderly apartment not too long ago. It was on Augusta Drive, and the applicant had a bedroom that they were going to then call a den. But the septic system was only approved for, I can't recall how many bedrooms it was, but this would have put them one over this. So what the applicant had to do was open that doorway up to, I think it's a 60 or 70 inch entrance, so that did not meet the definition of a bedroom by the state standards.
And that's what the applicant would do, or at least that's what he's suggesting in connection with the construction.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we should scratch that sentence as, should we approve this application or this regulation, I think that sentence should be omitted.
With your indulgence, I'd like to have Mr. Bergen go through his presentation, and then to the extent this issue is still an issue, we can take it up at that time, if that's okay by you.
Okay.
So those are the points, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gordon explained that we do feel strongly that the project as laid out needs to have the minimum 20 feet length between the buildings. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Udowski is going to speak to you about why 55 and older is preferential versus 62 or 65. So with that, I'd like to have Mr. Bergen come up and...
Before we do that, I think...
Yes, sir.
I'd like to go over, Mr. Miller had some comments. I'm looking for his sheet on them, but I know, for instance, I have in my notations for Mr. Miller to comment on what was formerly K. I don't know if it still is. Landscape and open space. He had some comments on that in his review, and I'm looking for that now.
I do have one copy of it, or I could read it to you if you'd like.
I must have written it down wrong, but I'm looking at at your comments. It says Section K requires...
The gist of that comment is that they have, that they kind of combine open space as an all-inclusive term, and again, looking how this might be, whatever terminology is in this regulation might be carried forth in other town regulations, sort of raises a concern. And I think that there's a difference between natural open space and recreational space or altered space. As I understand this proposal, all or most of the site will not, or none of the site will be left in its natural state. So that that should be somehow clarified in the regulations, that there's no requirement that areas be left in there, or there should be, whatever again this commission wishes it to be. But there's a difference between a yard space or a place where you put a shuffleboard court or a basketball court, as opposed to a natural area, and this regulation does not differentiate between that.
Well, I think it's an easy fix. I understand your point.
I agree it is an easy fix. I mean, most of these points are easy fixes, but
Sure.
that they should be fixed.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for, I'm not going anywhere, but is there any other questions for me at the second?
I just have another one that's nitpicky and an easy fix.
I shouldn't have asked.
Well, no, this one, you know, I'll throw a softball at you and you can hit it back. The term private muse, I was amused at that term. I grew up across the Sound, and we called them alleys back there. I understand maybe you don't want to call them alleys and you want to call them muses or whatever, but we need to define that.
Fine, muse. Yep, fine. We're going to define the muse as an alley. How's that?
If I recall the first meeting, you said you're going to have 2 homes for 300,000?
Two?
You said couple.
Yeah, I
So
thought,
how much, what was that?
They actually they spoke the last time that in the triplexes, the center units of each triplex, which would be 11
11 is
units.
what I thought, yes.
Yeah, which would be 11 units, would be the price-controlled one, I'll use
Correct.
that term?
Yes.
And it was price controlled because not only was the first sale controlled, but also subsequent sales are also controlled. I think that's a good word.
By a very modest inflation rate, I think 3 to 5%. It can't be sold greater than the purchase price.
But that price was 300, wasn't it?
I don't
I'm
think
talking
we-
about the first meeting that we had.
Very-
The very first one. Because I asked if it was going to be a lottery system. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah, well,
And you said no. I said,
Yeah,
"What's
the answer is-
interest?" Yeah, but you gave me a price.
the answer is it's not going to be a lottery system. To the extent that we specifically committed to a price, my best recollection is it's going to be in the neighborhood of 300,000.
That's what I recall, was it wasn't a set price at the time.
Right.
Right.
Maybe
But was
I'm
that for a 3-bedroom?
No, that's for a one-bedroom.
One bedroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's this,
Well, that's what I'm, because you still don't know the rates of the homes yet, right?
Well, to some extent, it's going to be market-driven.
So a 3-bedroom, 550? I mean, do you, or just so people know what they're going for.
Okay.
I mean, because if an Orange resident's selling their house for 350, they're not going to be able to afford.
Well,
You know what I mean?
if they're selling a home for 350, they may not be able to afford a 3-bedroom unit. But, you know, part of the reason why we have in this regulation 50% or more is going to be 1s and 2s, is to allow for just that eventuality.
Okay.
But I will, Mr. Wilcox, Mr. Anderson is here. I'll talk to Mr. Anderson while Mr. Bergen is up, and I'll see if I can come back to you with some more specifics on price points. Okay?
I don't need it.
Thank you. That easel that was here last time, did that belong to someone else who took it away?
I honestly don't know. We usually use the windowsill.
Okay. I just- Just put them up and take them down as I go. I'll start with this one while I make my introductory comments, just to refresh everyone. My name is Joe Bergen. My firm is Joseph Bergen Architect. I have my office in Essex, Connecticut. I'm a licensed architect in the states of Connecticut and New York.
Mr. Bergen, I have a question with the streetscape that you put up there, and it goes
Yes.
along with what Mr. Gordon was speaking about. Is that spacing between the homes to scale?
Yes, it is.
It is? Thank you.
Perhaps I should start by speaking to that point. This is a sampling of the different elevations that would be available to potential homeowners. And you can see just by the sampling of four buildings that the bulk, the geometry, the street facade, it's all varied. For instance, we have a two-story street facade here, next to which we have a one-story gable with a setback porch and another gable up beyond. You can see that there's already sort of a staggering in the bulk. Although, you know, the front wall may be aligned along a setback, as soon as you go past that setback, there's staggering and variation in each of the units, each of the buildings.
What was the setback there? I'm looking obviously from the front. What is the setback for these units?
The street setback is 15 feet. So I'd like to address the comments made at the last hearing with regard to bedrooms and dens and whatnot. And I guess I'll walk through the revisions that I've made to each of the buildings.
And again, these revisions are possible revisions. There may be instances where you don't have to make these changes, I'm assuming.
Yes, that's correct. And at some point in my presentation, I'll distribute a table that I've made that shows per each building type what the bedroom count is. And I'll point out to you at that time that where I've listed the minimum based on the definitions that you brought up, you'll see that there's a vast majority that qualify as two-bedroom, but with minor changes of reintroducing doors or whatnot, that vast majority of two-bedroom could break down into additional three-bedroom. So this was the unit called Cottage 1. Actually, you know, I think I'll distribute that now because it's attached. It's attached to some 8.5 by 11 pages that we've put together for your convenience.
Do we have additional copies of the breakdown? I only see one copy of the breakdown with this. Oh, okay, this is a whole pile of plans. Okay, I've got you.
I've passed out all of my copies. So, if I may, I'll return it to you when I'm finished. My apologies. So, looking at Cottage 1. Basically, we've just widened the entrance of the den. That disqualifies it as a bedroom.
And you've widened the entrance to the attic area as well.
Yes.
Yep.
And we've made this a half-height wall. There were no changes to Cottage 2. Now, at this point, I'm going to put up Cottage 3. Now, this is a new This is a new building type that was developed since the last hearing. And this is in response to the fact that there were 6 building types that had not been represented up to the point of the last hearing. Of those 6, 4 were typical, meaning that they have the same footprint. The footprint could be flipped or mirrored or rotated, but it was the same footprint. And 2 of those 6 were unique individual units. And at this point, we don't have a floor plan or elevations to represent those remaining 2 units. And with your permission, we would like to leave it that way for the time being. The idea being that we had hoped to have at least a smattering, and it turns out to be 2 now, of units that could be very much more custom designed with interaction from the homeowner. So I make that request, but I'll move on to showing you cottage number 3.
We can hear you when you don't have pain.
Okay. So cottage 3, can you hear me all right? Cottage 3 it's actually, it's derived from cottage 1. It's actually a very similar footprint with the exception that the porch wraps and there's an added space to the side. So it lays out, as you see it, a much more generous master suite, basically, is what we get.
Mr. Bergen?
Yes.
I note that there are second floors on these units. Are there room in the staircase for inclinators or other devices that would help people get from the first floor to the second floor?
To tell you the truth, I haven't contemplated that. However, the stairs the width of the stairs are generous, and my sense is that they would accommodate that kind of unit.
How many inches in a generous? 36? Or?
Yes, at least 36. That's required by code.
Along with that, I think cottage 1 and cottage 3 have an angled staircase. Would that impact the use of the elevator type apparatus?
I know that they do have them that do go on those corners, do go around the corners. You mean like a chair lift, that type of thing, or stair lift, they call them, yes.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
So I'll just flip to the elevations so you can see the impact of that additional. It's really very similar to cottage 1, or at least this version of that version of cottage 1. You see it here in the side elevation. It's a 1-story addition, and it joins with the porch, which wraps around. And in the front elevation, it's just it looks like a 1-story adjunct to the elevation. And to the rear, it's basically the same, with a window leading into the bathroom. And of course, on this side, you wouldn't see the added portion.
Are those gas-fired fireplaces, or?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
they are. Now, there was no change to the house. That's the one that's a solid 3-bedroom. And in the duplex, what I did was I removed the doors from the den. It was formerly called den, study, library / guest room. And that being here where I removed the doors. So this now is not defined as a bedroom, and by virtue of the second floor having pretty much open space throughout.
Excuse me, Mr. Bergen?
Yes.
I just want to interrupt for a second. It's Paul or Bo. Are studies allowed to have closets?
It would be allowed to have a closet. The question comes into, does it meet the other criteria to define it as a bedroom? The opening of the door, the ability for privacy, really.
Right.
I can read them to you. I have the definition. You can call it whatever you want, but if it's got a toilet, a tub, and a shower, it's a bathroom. You can call it whatever you want, and the same thing applies to bedrooms. You can label it a den. You can label it a dining room if you want, but if it meets the definition of a bedroom, we're going to call it a bedroom.
I think whether or not a bedroom has a closet, isn't that a real estate definition? If you were to put a house on the market? And
I was hoping, I know that our town, was it sanitarian who
Town
enforced this?
sanitarian, yes.
And I just remember that he enforced it, and there was an issue on a couple that I was involved with, whether or not I thought a closet was allowed. Maybe it was the door in front of the closet. You could have a cutout, but you couldn't have the door in front of the closet. I mean, it got down to that kind of minutia as to whether or not something qualified as a bedroom or really a den.
My guess would be, and again, it's just a guess, not being familiar with it, but my guess there must have been other circumstances if they were that nitpicky to get down to whether this closet is the deciding factor or not.
Maybe the door was a normal door or something like that.
Something of that nature.
The opening was a normal opening.
I would suspect, yes.
Yeah, I think it's sort of an either-or type of situation, the minor scene.
And the fact of the matter is, you can see in the breakdown of the bedrooms, as if the buildings were all built as drawn, there would be 11% three bedrooms, and that realistically won't be the case. This duplex is a prime candidate for being converted to a three-bedroom, I believe. It's shown as a two-bedroom because of the presence of that under-eave storage, which, although it's not an attractive bedroom, per the definitions could be considered one because it has a door.
Yeah, or you could really enclose this with full walls, this sitting area, and create a bedroom there too, if you were so inclined.
Would the under-eave storage be kind of like a sort of a slope wall that goes down?
Yes.
Is there going to be any headroom in it, or?
For a portion of it, there would be headroom, and there would be sufficient by code, the requirement for floor area to determine habitable space. There would be sufficient. But it's not an attractive space for a bedroom.
So the way it's being marketed, it's going to be envisioned as sort of unfinished space that you could use for storage.
That's correct.
And the insulation will be sort of separate from it, so it would not even be an insulated space necessarily?
No, it would be an insulated space.
Okay.
So finally, I come to the triplex. And the changes we made to the triplex are such that on the second floors, in the right-hand triplex, there's a bedroom. In the center one, there's no access to the second floor. In the left-hand triplex, there's no qualifying bedroom.
So now the loft area in the left one would not qualify?
Well, it lacks privacy.
Because now you have the half wall there. Okay, I'm looking at the old plan. Okay.
Yes. So, that's really what I've prepared to show tonight. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them if I may.
Mr. Bergen, you're going to address, not necessarily right now, but you will address the issue of the 62 versus 55?
Mr.
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. No.
So the questions that I had initially on this was, that some buildings were being represented as 2-bedroom units when they were clearly by definition 3-bedroom units. What he's shown us is that these can be permanently altered so as not to meet, the definition of a 3-bedroom unit, and that's was my concern when I questioned it, at the last public hearing. So now we can decide if we decide to go forward with this, if we want to go with the 50%, 67%, or somewhere in between, or different. But my concern was answered by him that these can be permanently altered in such a manner that they cannot be used for a 3-bedroom if they're not intended to be so. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions for him? Anybody from the public?
And Mr. Chairman, we're going to have Mr. Yudowski, I believe I'm mispronouncing his last name, I apologize, but I come and speak to you about the reason why we propose that 55 is an appropriate age restriction.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stanley Gniazdowski. Last name is spelled G-N-I-A-Z-D-O-W-S-K-I, and hopefully that's the most difficult part of my entire presentation tonight. I am president of Realty Concepts Incorporated. We're a real estate consulting and advisory firm that's based in Guilford, Connecticut. My credentials are I hold a certified general appraiser's license here in the state of Connecticut. Also hold a broker's license because some questions come under both licenses. I am a CCIM, which is a certified commercial investment member. I'm also an instructor in that program. I teach investment analysis, taxation, cash flow analysis. I also teach site selection and demographics course. I also am a counselor of real estate. There's about 1,100 of us internationally that hold that designation. I've just been awarded the FRIX designation of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, which is an appraisal designation in Europe. I'm also a counselor of real estate, as I said, and I am also an adjunct assistant professor of real estate at New York University. But I am a practitioner first and an academician second. I was asked by Attorney Porto to address the issue relating to age restriction for active adult communities, or as most people call them, age-restricted complexes. A little bit of a background. We've been hired in the past, within the past 3 years, to study age-restricted complexes and do demand analyses for some national developers, both from the Connecticut River going east and from the Housatonic River going west, identifying every town, every opportunity, the zoning regulations, where it's welcomed, where there were no regulations, to a very finite analysis. And that was it's a proprietary report on both of those. But what I can say is that the preponderance of the age-restricted complexes that are out there are mostly age 55 and older. There are some that are contemplated or were contemplated to be 50 years of age and older. And I do know that here in the town of Orange that the benchmark is 62 years of age and older, and that is in concert with federal subsidies, which opens up some doors for assistance in the town. But this project is a little bit different. This project is a private project, and it is a project that is addressed to the general marketplace. The methodology for analysis that I performed was to do a site visit, read the zoning regulations and the amendment, particularly relating to the restriction of age 62 here in the town of Orange, and predominantly looking at some market data and looking at information from the state of Connecticut relating to demographics for the town of Orange with they report, and also using a private demographic service, Resi, to develop my analysis. What I was able to do and able to clearly demonstrate that in the town of Orange, in particular, there is a segment of the population which is not being serviced by adult active communities. And that's about 30% of those residents in the town of Orange that are age 55 and older, especially when you set the benchmark at 62, 64 in that range. And as an example, taking the base data that was developed from the 2000 census, with a population at that time of approximately 13,233 people living in the town of Orange, there was 4,033 residents, or about 30.5% of the population, that were above the age 55. And there were approximately 1,395 persons between age 55 and 64, which is 35% of the number of 4,033. Looking to current demographic information for 2007, the estimated population is approximately 14,193 persons in the town of Orange, and there's approximately 4,837 residents that are 55 years of age and older, which is about 34% of your population.
And in 2000 was what, about 30.4 you said?
30.5.
3.5, okay.
Yeah. So there was about an increase of 20% from 2000 to 2007 that has taken place. And of that, between age 55 and 64, of that number of 4,837, about 39% fall between 55 and 64 years of age. And that's about an increase of about 33% in that bracket. Projected to 2012, taking the estimates that are available, projected population for persons over age 55 is estimated to be approximately 5,351 persons, or about 36% of the projected total population of 14,782 in the town of Orange. And the increase in the age 55 and older population from 2000 to 2012 is 10.63%. So your population is aging, and that segment of the market of your population for 55 and older is increasing in age. The concept of active adult communities is sometimes misunderstood, because there's certain catalysts, there's certain linkages that make active adult communities work. And one of the things that people contemplate when they sell their home is that they have certain things that have to be met in order for them to purchase and to stay within the area. One of those is that they desire to stay in close proximity to their families. They also desire to stay in close proximity to their places of worship. They also desire to be in close proximity to their social activities and the social groups that they belong to. They also want to be in proximity to their medical care. They find it very difficult as you get older to start changing doctors. You start relying on them more and more, and you want to be in close proximity to them. And we can't stop aging, so that's a very, very important factor for people considering when they buy an age-restricted complex. And they also want to be in proximity to shopping and recreational activities that they're used to and that they have performed in the past. And what they basically are looking for is minimal negative impact by becoming an empty nester when their children leave, or when they have the desire to downsize. They want to stay in close proximity to those other components that will minimize the impact on their move. So by having the ability to stay within about a 7 to 10 mile radius, is what most studies show, is the distance that most people will move when they look to go to an active adult community. Now, as you keep raising that threshold and 62, 64 are going up that way, you start pushing towards the congregate care facilities where it starts to get to be a lot more expensive, where you're looking for medical care, medical assistance to be provided as part of the complex. And that raises entirely different issues. This complex is not that type of complex. It is a complex that is designed specifically for active adults. And it also spreads the age within the complex and creates a very nice community, a very nice neighborhood for people to live in. So basically, in looking at the demographics of the town of Orange and looking at your current regulation excludes or puts pressure on residents in town and force them to go out of town to go to a complex that is age 55 or older. And it makes that decision much harder because they don't want to leave their families, they don't want to move away from their doctors, they're used to the lifestyle and the pattern that is in Orange. So the conclusions of my report as of yesterday is that by maintaining an age threshold of 62 years of age or older for an active adult community or age-restricted community reduces or eliminates an option for current town residents to remain in their hometown of Orange, Connecticut. That approximately 30% of the current 55 years of age and older population is adversely affected by your 62-year age threshold by being forced to move out of town, and that the age threshold of 55 of an older active community is in concert with similar complexes throughout the state of Connecticut and the region, and therefore is appropriate for the proposed active adult community. In this report that I'm going to give you is a specific report dealing with the demographics relating to age restricted only, 55 years of age and up, and there's also a supplement at the back before the conclusion, which is a general demographic and income profile, which gives you the current demographics for the town of Orange.
I've forgotten your first name, I'm sorry.
Stan.
Stan, in your studies, did you come across the usual age that people think about leaving their, I want to say, permanent homes or their homes where they may have raised their families? What is the usual age for that, or are there any demographics on that?
There's no hard demographics on it. In talking to clients that I do this type of studies for after the complexes are up, it's 55. It's around, it's around 55.
I mean, the way you presented it is that we're forcing, I don't mean to pejorative, but we're forcing them out at 55 like there was some kind of unwritten law that at 55 they decide to leave.
You could have an age-restricted complex that starts at 50. It's by deed restriction, and you put the controls into either the deed or the association documentation.
I think what Mr. Kaplan is getting at is you implied that by not having it at 55, we're leaving our people in town at our 55 with no other option than to get out of town.
Right, and I think that's why I brought up the issue of, did you do any, or did it come out as to any work that had been done in terms of numbers, demographics, as to when people usually leave their homes? Yeah. But you're saying it's around 55.
It's around 55, and a couple things happen at age 55. Usually you're an empty nester, or hope to be an empty nester by that time. Okay. Secondly, retirement starts coming into the picture. So while they're active and they're generating income, it affords them the opportunity to sell the house that they're in and go into an active adult community, an age-restricted community, and to get that in shape for when they're not working anymore, so they don't have to put the time and effort and the capital, because resources after retirement are sometimes restricted or limited. At least while they're working, they have the ability to put the property into shape. The other thing is, and which people don't talk about a lot of times, is going to an age-restricted complex, going to a common interest community. There's no ground care. It's part of the association fees that they pay. It's controlled, it's taken care of for them. But also, the second bedroom is an important component, especially when you start getting older and people start becoming ill. In my instance, it's I snore. Anybody here who doesn't snore, please stand up. But okay. I will talk to you away. But the issue is that sometimes there's an illness or there's some medical condition where they have to sleep in separate bedrooms. So, you know, two-bedroom units are usually in most demand, and it's usually for that reason and for visiting grandchildren or people coming from out of town.
If I understand the impact of your report, it's that, especially with regard to the subject complex, which is an active adult community, as opposed to an age-restricted only community, the 55 and older would have a bigger impact than if it was just age-restricted, in which case you would have, it would be less of an impact on the seniors.
Well, the term active adult community is interchanged with age-restricted many times. If you're looking for restriction due to age, that's defined by the developer.
Well, it seems like the developer is, and from what you presented, looking for that 55, that empty nester that you just described, not looking for convalescent care. We're not there. We're at that.
That would be an assisted living facility,
right, which is not what this developer is going to. So he's really, although our regulations set the bar at 62 for I think fairly good reasons, this particular development is looking really for someone who's younger than that.
Yes, and your regulations, I think, are in concert with the threshold that's set by the federal government for assistance for those people who need either assistance through income or through medical care. That's, I think, what the reason your 62 is there. But what about the person that lives in town who is 55, 50, 56, 57 that does want to downsize and they want to be in an active adult community, to be close to their friends, be close to their family, be close to their medical, close to their place of worship? That opportunity doesn't exist in Orange. So they have to move out of the community that they probably lived in for many, many years or grew up in. So, you know, it shut the door on that window of opportunity for them. And this project would open that door.
I think one thing we have to keep in mind is, you know, like when I reviewed these proposed regulations, I compared them with our existing PRD regs. But again, you know, in listening to the discussion in a public hearing, we're really considering a whole different avenue that we're anticipating, you know, the opportunity to go down if we so decide to. You know, we really can't compare it to our PRD regs, which are more inclined to, say, you know, an assisted living facility in some regards and a larger apartment-style complex. So, you know, you can draw some from those, but, you know, when we're being asked to consider something that is a different animal, yeah.
Yeah, you basically have a zero lot line complex where the land is in common and everybody has a fee to the improvements that are there. So what it does, it affords the town better control because there's one entity that controls the landscaping, how the properties look. If somebody leaves a bicycle or an abandoned car in their front yard, the association can take the responsibility, can act a lot faster in many instances than a town can.
Stan, did you calculate or analyze the percentage of Orange residents that are over 62 in 2000 and 2007 and the projection for 2012?
It breaks it down, up to 64,
right?
And in the report you'll see that, let me give you the age breakdown.
It breaks it down from 60 to 64, from 65 to 74, if you're looking at the same,
yeah,
looking at the
well, it's all the same base data. What happens is that all the demographics are generated by the federal government. They go to several different companies, and each one takes that base data and do the projection. So if you took out a report that had a population, and Brian had one and I had one, we'd have three different populations from three different services at this point in time. But starting in 2000, it would have been the same. Esri is one of the more reliable services that's out there and has more finite data. But I couldn't get to 62, it went to 64. So that's the data. It's close enough, as we say in demographics, about is the best you can do. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Any questions from the public?
There are some reports. Thank you.
We're going to have to divvy these up, I guess.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's, I think, all the fun we have for you. If there's any questions of us, we're happy to answer, or otherwise...
I have a couple questions with the other applications that are before us. with the application for a temporary special earth materials removal and filling. The plan calls to export 120,000 cubic yards over 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I would need to pull that sub-file, but that's my recollection. We definitely spread it out over time. This is if approved, a substantial undertaking, so it's going to take some time.
And it gives a breakdown of 5 or 6 trucks per day as an average. And, I didn't know how consistent that was going to be. That's how it broke it down in the report. And my question is somewhat for Paul. How do we maintain, the tracking base and that sort of thing on the roads over a 5-year period?
Quite frankly, we haven't ever done it over a 5-year period. Some of the new conditions we placed on there is that an engineer be present, mostly during a filling operation. As far as an export, though, you don't have quite the same concerns.
Yeah, they're actually going to be excavating 200,000 cubic yards, I think, if my memory has it well, and exporting 120,000 cubic yards and redistributing 80,000 cubic yards on the site.
They're not bringing any new fill in.
No.
Normally, the concern has been
Bringing it in.
If where it's coming from, what kind of material it is.
Thank you.
Doug Anderson from Anderson Wilcox. What we've done is we've actually done a complete cut and fill on the whole site, including basements of the units. So as far as the process of how that will occur, a substantial portion will happen within the early years of the project, which would be getting the site to grade and getting the site situated. And then throughout that process, through let's say the build-out time frame, as homes are built and sold, excavation will occur, on a per unit basis and kind of get staggered out that way. But it would be a little more intense in the beginning to get the site to a elevation where utilities, storm drainage, all that kind of stuff can get installed, road bases cut in and so forth. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, also, I just might suggest, as far as you're dealing with the tracking issues, that, given that it'll be more of a longer term, you just deal with the tracking issues as you would deal with any sort of construction site. So there wouldn't be any particular additional impacts from the removal of earth material other than there is just normal construction activity. And I'm sure Paul deals with that on a very regular basis.
I was just concerned because it's going to be over a long period of time is my concern.
In wetlands, they submitted a plan which they're going to do in phases. And I don't recall how many phases, but it would be phase 1 was a certain portion what they had to do before they could start phase 2.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw that.
And do we have any, for the removal, do we have any, require any signatures from the town engineer, perhaps?
Well, the town engineer has reviewed it, but
he has reviewed it?
There wasn't any comments.
No comment, okay. And that would be bonded, of course, too, to make sure?
Yes, that's correct.
And how about the plan for certification of soil erosion and sediment control? Has that been reviewed by the town engineer in inland wetlands?
I believe it has, yes.
And do we require signatures, or just they would comment?
On those documents? No.
Okay. And lastly, with the re-subdivision application, in the application, they deal with the abandonment of the roads that were in the original approved subdivision. But one point that's not addressed, at least that I saw, was that, is it Skyline Drive that exists there that comes down? Or Skyview?
Yeah.
If we abandon those other roads, I'm guessing, I didn't measure it out, but I'm assuming that we'd be creating a cul-de-sac in excess of 1,400 feet, which is in a violation of our 382-23G. Now, we do have a means that the commission can approve that, but it wasn't addressed, and I think that that has to be part of the re-subdivision application.
Which ones we're talking about abandoning?
Well, see, initially, that we had the roadway system that kind of came through here with the original subdivision. We're going to eliminate that and run this down, so my guess is from here to Grassy Hill Road is in excess of the 1,400 feet. And that should be addressed in the re-subdivision application, because we have to consider that. I mean, obviously, we're only adding 7 more homes. We do have an emergency means of access and egress. We're also getting the extra bonus of having increased water pressure there from the site. So a lot of safety issues are addressed in the application, but it still has to be addressed. And it isn't in the application, so I think the application has to be amended to reflect that.
Well, we can certainly amend the application to reflect that. We are aware of it. And this has been the plan that's gone to both, as Mr. Gordon indicated, police, fire, and the traffic commission.
We do need, though, when we consider this, we have to get, according to our regulations, a letter from the police and from fire commenting on that specific part of that proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I will amend the re-subdivision application, and I will solicit opinions from both police and fire regarding this issue.
And if you, it's, I can read it to you if you'd like, just so you know the specifics that are required. 3323. Okay. Says, it's under 383234A, where it says the commission may do it upon certain provisions. The fire marshal or his designee has certified that the proposed cul-de-sac street exceeding such length will not negatively impact the ability to provide fire protection to any lots along such cul-de-sac. And actually, this project is going to increase the fire protection because you're increasing the water pressure. And notably, too, under B, the chief of police or his designee has certified that the proposed cul-de-sac street exceeding such length will not negatively impact upon the ability to provide police protection to any lots along the cul-de-sac street. And again, I think this, doesn't do that for two reasons, because we also have the emergency connection into the proposed subdivision, but it does have to be addressed as per our regulations.
Not a problem. Again, we did run this by both police and fire and traffic, but we're happy to button it up with those letters.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Would anybody care to address the commission on this issue? Are there any additional questions from the commission at this time? I think at this time, too, we do need to get the letter from the fire and police regarding the re-subdivision application. I think we should maybe keep the public hearing open for our next meeting, because we have to keep it open to get this material anyway. In case we have any questions that come up, we can contact Mr. Denise or Mr. Marino to...
We're beyond the 30-day period, I think.
You need an extension letter?
Yes.
That's the applicant. It's really up to the applicant to grant such an extension, so we really have to formally ask him at this point to continue this to the September 7th meeting, I believe, Tammy, is it? Next meeting?
Do you need a letter? Some towns require a letter, some just...
You can furnish us with a letter tomorrow, but certainly your
my representation means something in this town.
Right, yes.
Excellent.
Are there any questions from the commission to any of the people that are here that can be addressed at this point?
No, but did Joe, I hate to be, did you say that we're okay to get the extension?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, you need a 30-day extension, right? But hopefully we can close the public hearing as of 9/7.
Yeah.
Fine.
The only information that I'm looking for really are these two letters as far as closing the public hearing. Commissioner Parenti isn't here, and he may have some requests for some additional information once he reviews the tapes. But other than that,
I think as part of the inquiry on the subdivision cul-de-sac, just to firm up one last time this water pressure issue with Chief Sherwood.
Okay.
Okay. I think everybody understands there's a resolution to that, but just make sure everything's okay with that.
I think also that we did discuss several additional amendments to the proposed regulations.
That's right, and he was going to...
That should be submitted,
correct,
hopefully prior to the September 7th meeting, so that we can review them and discuss them and be all ready to go.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. I will tell you, in reviewing my notes, the only question I have, though, is defining a single-family home under this setting, since it is a condominium.
Single-family attached and detached it was my concern.
Okay, single-family.
Yeah, it wasn't single-family home. Fine. I think that's self-evident. It's just the question of what a single-family attached home is. And again, that's probably something that the town will choose to utilize in other circumstances as well.
Okay.
There are some existing definitions to that effect in our regulations.
Doesn't say single-family attached, though.
Yes, it does.
It does. I'm sorry. I stand corrected. I didn't see that, Paul.
One less thing to do.
I see it, Paul. I'm sorry. Okay, never mind. There was a couple other minor points.
Yeah. They're both basically housekeeping.
Divorce was mentioned, I mentioned that only because I see that as something that, 50% of marriages, or I've heard this, end in divorce. It seems to me we're going to face that on a regular basis.
Understood. It will be done.
Would you care to address the commission?
Patricia O'Leary, Treat, 801 Grassy Hill Road. As an interested participant, September 7th is a Friday. Would we maybe be talking about a different day?
Sorry, September 4th, I'm sorry.
September 4th.
September
Okay,
4th.
good.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all from us.
All set.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll adjourn the public hearing and continue until our next meeting, which is September 4th. Thank you. We've covered all our agenda items. At this time, we'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
See how easy that is? Smooth.
We were almost stuck here last week, Paul. We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Meeting adjourned at 9